All right, welcome to the Beacon Athlete of the Year selection show. We have two members of the committee here, the selection committee, Ben Mandel, myself, and Dylan Mel,
How's
a
it
member
going?
of Stay Humble Sports, who is hosting this selection show for us today. So we have the Beacon Athlete of the Year tournament coming up starting Monday. Polls open up at 8 o'clock. They'll run for 24 hours. We will go through the schedule there as a part of the show. We'll go through how the bracket committee selected everyone and seeded all of the athletes here from Wilkes. And we'll kind of go through some of our predictions. So now I'm just going to jump in to the men's bracket here as we dive in. So I currently look for our bracket.
I mean, I'm pretty excited for this Athlete of the Year. It's the first year that I've been on the committee for it. Of course, I've been a voter since I've been at Wilkes, as many of you should be if you are a part of the Colonel community. But I am definitely looking forward to seeing if my bracket is accurate or not. As it's the first year I've really, tried to fill one out like in this format.
Yeah, it's been exciting, and I'll say I know for myself, the last 2 years being a part of it, it really has been just a ton of fun.
Yeah, and not for every college student around the world, but for the ones at Wilkes, this is almost a little bit of a substitute of March Madness, which we missed out on. Obviously, it's not as a big a spectacle as the games are, but, for the people at Wilkes, these people, and it's exciting to see them move on.
Yeah, and this actually has been pretty exciting throughout the campus community because, everyone really has kind of just jumped on board and enjoyed it.
Yeah. And especially a lot of our teams have a pretty big social media presence.
Yeah, that much we have figured out. So now I have found the bracket. We are going to get it pulled up here. So here is the men's side of the bracket. As you can see, there are 24 athletes on the men's side. Top 8 seeds have a bye. The top seed, we have Donald Flynn, number 1 seed. This was really a no-brainer for the committee. He was nominated to be Player of the Year for the men's ice hockey team, and that's across divisions 2 and 3. So not just Division 3 like most of these athletes. Men's ice hockey goes across divisions 2 and 3. So he was a first-team All-American, second-team All-USCHO.com. And he was up for Player of the Year. It really was a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, when we came in, we said, so we all agreed Donald Flynn number 1, let's start at 2, and everybody went, yep, and we moved on.
So there actually was room for a little bit of debate here when we go to our 2 seed. Our 2 seed was Jose Tabora from the football team. They went 8-3 throughout the season, an 8-2 regular season, lost the bowl game to Susquehanna. But Jose Tabora, really, you saw the way the offense was with him and without him, specifically in the Misericordia game. He had a tough time. He got booted from that game, and the offense went from clicking on all cylinders to barely being able to get across and get a win. But, so a lot of success coming for the football team from Jose Tabora. He put up great numbers. He's one of the best players to ever come through Wilkes. For us, I think, especially for me, that's why he's our 2 seed.
Yeah, I mean, you basically hit everything there, just an all-around athlete.
So now we go to the 3 seed, who arguably could have been the 2 seed, and that's another men's ice hockey player, Michael Gerska.
Yeah, I mean, defensive stud.
He really locked down the defense. He was a second-team All-American. He was not named to the USCHO.com teams. Probably should have been. But a great season for him. He led all defensemen in the country in assists, which actually it's going back. I want to jump back to Donald Flynn because, he was up for Player of the Year as a sophomore because he led the country in goals and was second in points.
Yeah.
And again, that's across divisions 2 and 3. So Michael Gerska led all defensemen in assists. He manned the power play, which was 10th best in the country. He ran the point, which is really where he picked up a lot of his assists. But, I mean, it was a dominant season for Gerska. He was one of the best defensemen in the entire country.
For sure.
Now, moving on to number 4, Dylan, you saw a little bit more of Rob Pecorelli. He's our 4 seed.
Yeah.
A little bit of a mix-up when the brackets came out because Andrew Potter, who's the 21 seed, accidentally his name was put down twice in Rob Pecorelli's spot, and a lot of people thought we had snubbed Pecorelli. Unfortunately, we did not, and we had that error fixed. But Dylan, what can you say about Rob?
Yeah, I mean, Rob's just an offensive threat on the court. I mean, clearly the scoring option number 1 for the Colonels, and I think that Pecorelli could have found himself as a higher seed in our bracket had there been more team success for the Wilkes basketball team.
Agreed. The basketball team the last 3 seasons, not counting last year, really was one of the better teams on campus, especially the last 2 years, with the top seed in the playoffs and then making it all the way to the championship last year. But this year, no playoff appearance. They lost 3 starters and 5 seniors. And you could tell it really took a toll on this team. And while Rob was the best player on the team this year and I think he could have been up for Player of the Year in the conference. He did not win it. But, Rob Pecorelli definitely, he deserves to be up on this list, maybe higher. Unfortunately, though, when you have 2 All-Americans on the hockey team and a heck of a standout at quarterback for the football team, which went 8-3, he ends up in the 4th spot.
Yeah.
Now, we go up to number 5, Kyle Bentz. And really, our men's soccer team, they weren't a playoff team this year, but they are very underrated. And Kyle Bentz has consistently been their best player for the last 4 years. And it's nice to see him finally get some recognition and get all the way up to that 5 seed in this bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I know when we were talking about the bracket, we didn't want to overlook any sports, and I feel like that happens a lot with soccer on certain campuses, so we had to give Bentz the credit he deserves.
Yeah, and I mean, he led the team in goals. He was easily the guy. So teams will always have one guy that they game plan for. And when teams played against Wilkes, Kyle Bentz was that guy.
Yeah.
So moving up to number 6, we have another men's ice hockey player. And it may feel like this is very men's ice hockey heavy in the top part of the bracket, and that's because it is. And that's also because this team was consistently one of the best in the country. They were ranked for about half of the season in the top 15. And again, this is across divisions 2 and 3. And Nick Fia led the conference in assists. He played on a line with Donald Flynn. He was up there in points. He was the number 2 point getter in the conference. And really came on as a goal scorer as the season went on. As coach said consistently, look, this guy is a playmaker and he can score. He doesn't score as much because he doesn't necessarily shoot the puck as much as they would like. But when he shoots, he finds the back of the net.
Yeah, I mean, back to what you're saying about the ice hockey team taking up half of the first 6 spots. I mean, when you have a team that is just this standout good at a school, you're going to have multiple stars on that team that deserve recognition, and we didn't want to just skip over them just because they played hockey.
So now Fia was also named to the All-USCHO team, but he was snubbed from the All-American team. I think he could have made it, but again, when you're going across divisions 2 and 3, there are a lot of guys that could make that list. For a team that didn't win a conference championship, unfortunately, because they ran into a ridiculously good Utica team that I think would have won a national championship this year had they had the championships played. You can't give them 3 All-Americans, so instead they give them 2 All-Americans, 2 All-USCHO.com team members. Nick Fia on that USCHO.com team. Now, over to the 7 seed, we have another football player, and this is really the key member of the Wilkes football defense. That's Bud Moyer.
Yeah, I mean, 100-plus tackles this season, absolute stud on the defensive end. You talk about with Bentz before, guy that teams have to game plan for. And on the defensive end, that is Moyer for the Colonels.
Yeah, and Wilkes was the number 2 team against the run this year in the MAC, something that they really struggled with the last few years, and Bud Moyer is a big reason for that, as well as another member who did make it into this poll, one of our D linemen, Vinny Warner. As you see, he is number 10, but Bud Moyer, really got to give credit to where credit's due. He was the lone first-team all-conference member for the Colonels, and I mean, he had a heck of a season.
Yeah.
So we go now to our last of the first-round buys, and that's John DeVito of wrestling.
Yeah, DeVito was, in my opinion, the best wrestler on the team by far, and I think the committee agreed with that. And DeVito, had wrestling gone on longer, would have gone to national tournaments to represent the Colonels.
Yeah, heck of a season for DeVito. Wrestling is usually, and he's probably higher up on this list had the wrestling team had more success, which is unfortunate if you think about, because wrestling really is kind of an individual sport.
Yeah.
But in years past, the wrestling team has been one of the better teams on campus. They weren't there this year. Last year, we did have a wrestler win the tournament, though. So keep your eyes on John DeVito. So we now look. We're going to go by matchups here. It's 16. We'll go from the top all the way down. The 16 seed in Tyson Arugio and the 17 seed in Jaquan Shields. Tyson Arugio quietly had a fantastic season for the Colonels. He was 3rd in the team in goals. He was 9th in the country in goals scored. He draws the 16 seed, unfortunately, just because of how much talent there is in this bracket. But another guy who maybe if he's makes a little bit more noise personality-wise, he finds his way higher up this list.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of this bracket, he's almost hindered by his team's overall success and just how many standouts there are on the team. I'm sure he wouldn't trade that away for a higher seed on the bracket, but it does come back to hurt him here as he gets a 16 seed.
Yeah, so he draws the matchup against Jaquan Shields, running back for the Colonels, who started out as the 4th string guy in the depth chart coming into camp. And he works his way up. And, interesting fact about Jaquan Shields, once he got the starting job, he averaged 150 yards a game.
Yeah.
He really tore things up. And again, if he played a full season as a starter, he probably ends up in the top 8, maybe even the top 5, because of just how good he was. Another note, Jaquan Shields is the adopted son of Deion Sanders.
Yeah, so. And this bracket does, there is a hint of a popularity contest when it comes to this, as it is fan voted on. So that could come back to hurt Arugio in the end of things.
It could. So now we go down to the 9 seed versus the 24. That's Tyler Barrow and Zach Shea. Tyler Barrow, this is the USCHO Rookie of the Year last year, which, again, national level, Divisions 2 and 3. He's a sophomore this year. He scored the biggest goal in program history with Donald Flynn not in the game, in the mini game of their playoff series against Stevenson to get them to the USCHC Championship Series. Tyler Barrow scores the overtime game winner, walks them off.
Yeah.
And, this is a guy who we almost missed because of how many hockey players we have on this list. I mean, he was a last-second at-large bid. We realized, wait a minute, Tyler Barrow's not on this list.
Yeah, and then, the whole list had to get shifted down there for Barrow. I mean, like you said, a lot of great talent coming from this Wilkes hockey team.
He draws the matchup against Zach Shea, and Dylan, you know a lot more about Zach Shea than I do.
Yeah.
We were a big-time advocate to get him into this bracket. Unfortunately, he's going to draw the 24 seed in the toughest first-round matchup, arguably, in Tyler Barrow.
And I think Shea and Potter, who we will talk about in the next matchup, could have found themselves higher on this list if they weren't gotten the opportunity to finish out their season. Wilkes was just starting conference play when everything happened and the university had to shut down. So no one's to say where Wilkes' season would have gone, but Shea, a freshman for the Colonels, comes in as their lead setter, and has some real clutch moments early on in their season, and earned him that at-large bid. Although, unfortunately for him, he can only be as high as the 24 seed because they played about a third of a season, maybe half, but not a lot of conference play.
Yeah, the volleyball team played about half a season, and that really hurt Shea and Potter. We kind of said to ourselves, how can we justify putting them higher than a 20 seed? So that brings us to our next matchup with the 21 seed, Andrew Potter, taking on the 12 seed, Michael Patterson-Jones. Michael Patterson-Jones, the goaltender for the men's ice hockey team, for a majority of the season, he had the highest winning percentage of any goaltender in the country. The freshman came in. He took the job from Brandon Gordon. And Brandon Gordon, he outstanding goaltender for the Colonels, which is more of a testament to the guy they call PJ.
Yeah. I mean, again, when you're the lead goalie on a team that has so much success, credit has to be given to you, as you are the last defenseman, per se, in the line. And team wins a lot. It's probably because the goalie's been blocking a lot.
Yep. So, tough matchup for Potter. We go to the next matchup now. We have number 13 seed, football's Derek Nelson, wide receiver, and men's swimming Justin Berta. And Derek Nelson, he had a great year. And, I mean, just from his freshman year, as soon as he set foot on campus, he doesn't look like the most athletic guy, but there's just something about him. He makes the most ridiculous plays. He makes the most insane catches, and there's something about him. Again, he's not the best athlete, but he makes it happen.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think if you're not the best athlete, and this can go for any sport, your IQ just has to be so high on the sport that you know to be in the right place at the right time to make up for that.
So over to the next matchup, we have men's soccer, Russell R.J. Rao, going up against Zach Neshiwat from football. Rao was the goalkeeper for the soccer team. He had a stellar season. And again, if the team had more success, he might have been able to draw a first-round bye or maybe a top 10 seed.
Yeah. I mean, like you alluded to earlier, there's just so many great athletes at Wilkes that it's so hard to, give certain people lower seeds because you're like, oh, that guy was for sure top 10. And then you're like, well, there's actually a lot of great athletes here.
And he's drawing Zach Neshiwat, who did a great job for the football team this year at corner. He fought his way into the starting lineup. He ended up starting at corner. And he kept Wilkes perfect, undefeated against Albright with a game-sealing interception. In the final seconds, he ended up earning the Defensive Player of the Week award for that play. So Neshiwat, he ends up earning with 22 seed. Really a testament to him to get onto this list. Neshiwat, I'm a friend of his. But if you had told me last year that he was going to end up in the Athlete of the Year bracket of the top 24 athletes, I would have said, he better put in the work, and he did.
Yeah.
So now we go to the 14 and the 19 seed. 14 seed Mark Mullins, 19 seed Mustafa Almeki. Mark Mullins, another one of the men's basketball team who really was a standout player, had a great season, kind of tapered off as the season went on, but that's what happens when teams can game plan for you. And Mustafa Almeki, one of the top wrestlers.
Yeah, Mullins and Pecorelli were a great 1-2 combo this year for the Colonels. Despite their record, these two could put the ball in the hoop for sure.
So we go down. We have the 10 seed, Vinny Warner. He goes against men's cross country, Noah Molina. Vinny Warner, a huge part of that defense. A huge part.
Yeah.
If you talk to any of the defensive linemen that have been here the last 4 years, they will tell you Vinny Warner is the best defensive lineman here at Wilkes.
Yeah, I remember you and Mike, when we were talking about at-large bids, Vinny Warner was one of the first names that you guys brought up. You said he has to be in here.
Yeah, and he probably should have been a automatic bid. Unfortunately, the Beacon didn't print an issue the week he had a pick six. Yes, this defensive lineman had a pick six.
crazy to wrap your head around still.
Now the final matchup here in that first round, Nick Yannick against Shane Henahan for men's soccer. Yannick only played 6 games, and he still, or I believe he played 6.5 games, and he still led the team in receiving yards.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine if Yannick had played a full season, he would have made the top 10 and could have potentially had a first round bye for sure.
Yannick is a player I actually played against in high school. So, he's a guy who he was on my rival high school team. And he's a guy who tormented us year in and year out. Very thankful that he committed to Wilkes, and I no longer had to play against him.
Yeah.
So now, before we wrap things up on the men's side, Dylan, who do you think is going to have the most success here? First, let's crown a champion, and let's pick a Cinderella here.
So, for my champion on the Wilkes side, I do have Donald Flynn. I think that we got it right as the committee, ranking him as the 1 seed. I think the hockey team has a great presence on social media, very popular with the Wilkes students, and Flynn will earn himself the votes. And if I had to go with a Cinderella, I think I would go with Patterson Jones. Again, for similar reasons, I think the hockey team has just an enormous fan base. You can't argue that they had the most success of any Wilkes men's team this season. And yeah, I mean, they're just a popular bunch of guys.
Yeah, I also have Donald Flynn as as the champion. It's hard to argue with someone who was literally nominated and very close to winning a Player of the Year award on a national level. It is almost impossible to argue with that. If I had to pick a Cinderella, though, I'm actually going with Derek Nelson from football. I do think Patterson Jones is going to have success in my bracket that I filled out. I have Patterson Jones making it all the way to that quarterfinal round. But I have him falling to Derek Nelson. I think Derek Nelson, he's been really excited for this. He's been reaching out to me for the last 2 weeks. Hey, when's this happening? When's this happening? I told him, hey, just keep your eyes peeled. Just keep looking out for it. Eventually it'll come. It has, and he's ready to go. He told me he's up to the task and wants to be he's ready to be a Cinderella. When he saw the bracket, he saw he was a 13 seed. He couldn't have been more excited.
Oh, nice. Some little inside information from you there.
Yeah, so now we're going to jump over to the women's bracket. And the big thing with this bracket was really that, I mean, everyone really seemed on par with each other.
Yeah. I mean, we had like the first couple top seeds we were able to get out in about, I'd say like 15 minutes or so. We were able to get like the first 5. But then from then to about 19, 20 seed maybe, it was just like, are we going with this person or this person? And it was just a toss-up, it seemed.
Yeah, definitely fair to say. Jamie Minkovic from women's volleyball, just how dominant she was what stood out to us, and really what kind of forced us to put her as the 1 seed. There might have been others who were.
Yeah, I mean, I think she had like double the kills as the next person on the team. I mean,
yeah, it really was just. It seemed like it was a unanimous decision for us, but it wasn't an easy unanimous decision.
Yeah.
It really kind of came down to, hey, who else would go here? I think really there's just a lot of parity here.
For sure.
So we go to the 2 seed, Jessica Egan, another women's soccer player, another great season from her. Fantastic year. She's a defenseman. She's their go-to if they get a penalty kick. Jessica Egan's taking the shot. And I've seen her time and time again come through for the Colonels. And, once again, another great year for them. They end up in the playoffs. They drew a tough first-round matchup with Stevens, newcomer to the conference. So, you can't really fault them too much there. Another great season from them and another great season from Jessica Egan.
Yeah. I mean, completely agree with everything you said there.
And that's what brings us to our 3 seed, Neve Harkins.
Yeah, I mean,
Same thing.
women's soccer, another great season. I mean, interchangeable, you could argue, for these two and three.
I don't think that they are. I think Jessica Egan does provide more of a scoring aspect than Neve does. Both defenders. Neve was locked down, but and arguably a little bit better on the defensive side. So that's where you can argue that they are interchangeable. But Jessica Egan's offensive prowess really, really stood out for me, especially when we were doing as a part of the committee and doing the seating.
Yeah.
So jumping over to the 4 seed, Lauren Shiplett. Field hockey, great player, very good season for her. Another first team all conference year for her. It's now back to back. And as a defenseman, it's not easy to stand out on the score sheet, yet she still finds a way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't huge into field hockey, but when I was looking over the numbers while we were doing the committee, you couldn't argue that the numbers were certainly backing up Shiplett as the 4 seed.
So then we have Samantha Cesari as the 5 seed from women's soccer. She's the goalkeeper. And similar to Rao on the men's side, had a very good season. Her team had more success. It got her higher up in the bracket.
Yeah.
Now we jump over to the 6 seed, Allison Jolly. She is probably the highest seed out of both brackets, with the exception of Rob Pecorelli, to be on a team that really didn't have too much success, but her numbers were just undeniable with the amount of shots that she faced, the games that she was able to steal and get wins for her program. An outstanding year for her. She was on the women's lax team that played a few games, but that really can't factor in because spring sports didn't have a season.
Yeah.
Allison Jolly, outstanding year and an outstanding player as a sophomore.
Yeah, as the goalie of the women's ice hockey team, she had a lot on her shoulders, and I mean, just every single time I watched her play, she just delivered an outstanding performance at goalie.
So we now go to the 7 seed, Alexa Cosgrove from women's swimming. Yeah. She had the best year out of the women's swimmers. They didn't have the numbers, so again, they're not going to have that team success. But individually, she broke tons of records, and really, we saw an opportunity. We jumped on it to get swimming up into this first round bye.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, coming around this part, a lot of these middle seeds were interchangeable, but we saw the opportunity to give swimming some recognition and gave her a bye.
So now to the 8 seed, we have Maddie Kelly. Field hockey and women's basketball player. She was a driving force in that women's basketball team. Again, not too much success, but she really was. She always earned high praise from her coaches, both from field hockey and women's basketball. To stand out in 2 sports, that's not easy.
Yeah, she's one of those players that really, I know, especially for basketball, which I covered more of, she really leaves it all on the court. I mean, you could see how invested she was, and she was really the playmaker for the women's basketball team.
So now jumping into the matchups, we'll do the same thing we did on the men's side. Go from the top down on the bracket. We have Alexis Sierry and Kendall Castro as the 16-17. Alexis Sierry, a standout season from the women's tennis team in the fall. Their spring season was canceled, but they still had a whole fall season, so they are in the bracket. And then Kendall Castro, who was arguably the best offensive player for the women's ice hockey team, along with Shauna Tubbs.
Yeah. For me, Stierie's numbers really jumped off the page when looking at statistics. I thought she maybe should have been potentially a little higher than she was ranked, but, I mean, her numbers speak for themselves for me.
Yeah. So now we go down to the 9 and 24. We have Zoe Stepanski and Ashley Burkhart. Ashley Burkhart is the lone spring athlete in this bracket because she was given an automatic bid as an Athlete of the Week award winner before this whole pandemic hit. So we have to honor that. She got a default 24 seed because of it, but she is the lone spring athlete in there. And then we have Zoe Stepanski, who another first team all conference player for this field hockey team. They had a pretty good season. Um, you know, really, I think she also could have been a little bit higher up on this list, but I think Lauren Shiplett really kind of took a lot of that spotlight from her as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So over to the 12 and 21, we have Delphina Bracke and Gianna Roberts.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke on like the success of the women's soccer team. They're not. I mean, if you had to compare them to a team on the men's bracket, you'd compare them to the men's ice hockey team. We've talked about this with a team that sees a lot of success. You're going to see a lot of players make it onto a bracket like this because there's a lot of people that are responsible for that, and we have to highlight them.
Yeah, and that's similar to field hockey as well because field hockey did have success. They were a playoff team. They had about the same amount of success as the women's soccer team. Field hockey ends up drawing 4 athletes.
Yeah.
Gianna Roberts, though, you covered women's basketball a lot this year. She, I believe, she was up there in scoring and rebounds.
Yeah, Roberts was a real paint presence for the Colonels, and if you caught Roberts on a night that she had it, I mean, she was just making shot after shot in the paint.
Yeah. So jumping down to the next matchup, 13 seed Lauren Baldwin, 20 seed Alexa Rango. Alexa Rango ended up earning an Athlete of the Week award when she earned a Goaltender of the Week nomination for her conference. Really just a standout performance for the Colonels. With the amount of shots that they gave up as a team, they had to ride 2 goalies, and both of them played spectacular this season. That earns Rango the 20 seed. And Lauren Baldwin, another great player for field hockey, she earned herself an Athlete of the Week, and so in an automatic bid, and that got her the 13 seed. She had another tremendous season.
Yeah.
Jumping down to the next matchup, the 11 seed and the 22nd seed. Field hockey's Morgan Murphy is the 11 seed, and to be honest, I thought she was going to be the highest ranked field hockey player before we really crunched the numbers and looked at everything. She led the team in goals, second team all conference. Really, it seemed like a no brainer to me, but I think showing that both Shiplett and Stepanski were first team while Murphy was second team. And that was enough of a standout for me and the rest of the committee to really kind of put Murphy a little bit lower on this list. But leading the team in goals, that does say a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Especially a talented team. Again, I'm going to harp in on that, but to be the leader in such an important stat like goals and field hockey for a really talented team that made the playoffs, do that right.
So then you go down to Kiana Jadlicka. A solid season for her. She earned an automatic bid with an Athlete of the Week award, and I believe the first issue we did, she scored a couple of goals, a game winner. She came in as a transfer student this year and really kind of lit it up. Jumping down to the next matchup, Macy Berryman, Carly Huffman, women's basketball, women's volleyball, 14 and 19 seed. Macy Berryman established herself early on as a shooter. I know I spoke with a couple opposing coaches over at Kings and Misericordia, and Macy Berryman was the player that was highlighted. Do not let her get an open look. Do not let her get an open shot. If you do, you will end up on the bench. That was the philosophy of a lot of other teams because Macy Berryman, when she got hot, man, she doesn't miss.
Yeah, I mean, I saw her hit some ridiculous shots this season. I think the most ridiculous shot I saw her hit was just about 6 or 7 feet behind the 3-point line, double teamed, but there's like 30 seconds left in the game, and Wilkes just has to put shots up to get back into it, and she just drills this 3-pointer. I mean, smothered.
It really didn't matter for her. She found a way to get her shots up, and she found a way to hit them. Jump down to Carly Huffman, women's volleyball. She was their best player, not named Jamie Mikovic.
Yeah, and I mean, not to just harp in on how good Mikovic was, but I mean, you see the difference there, 18 seeds. And I think almost that hurt Huffman because she's playing with such a talent like Mikovic that
Hmm.
it makes her look worse than she actually is when she's actually a great player as well.
Yeah. So next matchup, Emily Biddlesbach and Caroline Rickard from cross country and women's soccer. Emily Biddlesbach was a great talent this year for the Colonels. Um, I mean, when they needed a goal, she came through, it seemed like.
Yeah. I
And on
mean,
the offensive end, she was their top player.
yeah, clutch gets you a lot of spots in rankings like this. We've highlighted several clutch moments already with some of these athletes.
And then Carolyn Rickard, she was the most consistent runner for women's cross country this year. She may not have had the best performance, but we looked at consistency, and she was the most consistent out of all the runners this year for the women's side. And after speaking with a couple of sources with the cross country team, we decided that Caroline Rickard was the best bet for that spot.
Yeah.
And then final matchup on the women's side, Francesca Varela Seri and Shauna Tubbs. Shauna Tubbs, like Kendall Castro, their numbers identical.
Yeah.
Same amount of goals, same amount of assists.
I think it was like one extra assist or something that like made it
No,
17 and 18.
It was the same amount of goals, same amount of assists. Shauna Tubbs had one more power play goal than Kendall Castro, but Kendall Castro was one higher on the plus. She was +1 over Shauna Tubbs, so she was on the ice for one less goal allowed.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. Their numbers almost identical. So we gave them the 17 and 18 seeds.
Yeah. And then for Fran, I mean, if you look at just the statistics, you won't see the full story. The way that tennis works is like the best players play the better players. So like your win-loss record doesn't necessarily tell who the best player on the team is, but she's been consistent for Wilkes since she's gotten here and all-around great player.
Yeah, and you make a great point. The best players play the best players. We were looking at the records and some of the people, and like, oh, hey, this person's 6-0, but they're playing the fifth best player on the other team. And not to knock you, you shouldn't get knocked because of your competition, but there's a reason you're playing that low. This person is playing this high. For her to do what she did against the level of competition she played, it earns her the 15 seed.
Yeah.
So now, Dylan, who do you have winning this, and who's your Cinderella?
So, winning it, I have Jessica Egan. I think that the women's soccer team will show some support. And Egan had an all-around amazing season. She talked about leading goal getter for the Colonels. Question: when you say Cinderella, would you consider someone below a 4 seed making your final four a Cinderella, or are you talking
I would
below 10
say,
seed?
in terms of this bracket, a Cinderella would be anyone who did not have a first round bye.
Okay.
So not in seed and higher.
Then
Or not in lower.
I would say that if I had to pick a Cinderella, I would go with Dell. Because again, I think the women's soccer team will show out with their media presence. And I think that they all had a really good season. And you could have argued that Dell should have had a first round bye potentially.
Yeah, so my champion is going to be, I have Lauren Shiplett from field hockey. I think she's going to turn out and win. I think she had a fantastic season. I have her and Jessica Egan in my final. But if there is going to be a Cinderella, I was also thinking Dell. But the only issue would be her second round matchup, which is against Samantha Siri, her own teammate, who's a higher seed. I think that would hurt her. I don't think she would win that matchup.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of what do you call it, Cinderellas on my side of the bracket, so that was just one that I had to go with.
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to say anything else there, but my Cinderella, I have Morgan Murphy from field hockey. I think she had a terrific season. And again, I think when you lead your team in goals, it really says something.
Yeah. The Cinderella I was going to go with was Ali Jolly. I have her in my final four because I just think like her presence on that Wilkes women's ice hockey team, you could argue that she was responsible for many of their wins, if not all of them.
I agree. I think Ali Jolly's. I think her and Kendall Castro both are very popular among the women's ice hockey team and among the entire campus community. I think they could both get themselves some votes and easily slip in and win this tournament.
Yeah.
So, Dylan, I'd like to thank you and Stay Humble Sports for hosting this mini selection show video.
Of course.
For anyone watching, you guys can tune in and vote on Twitter or the Wilkes Beacon Twitter accounts. You can follow Dylan and I on Twitter. We will be retweeting. We will be tweeting about the event as it is happening. The men's voting starts tomorrow, Monday at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And if you're watching this before then, make sure you go to the Wilkes Beacon website and submit a copy of your bracket. Who do you think is going to win? Anyone who could submit a perfect bracket will end up being featured by the Beacon, and other potential prizes could be given out as well. We're still kind of ironing that out. So anyone who wants to submit a bracket. We'll copy a link to the video here. So if you're watching, we'll get that up there for you guys. And yeah, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and vote for Athlete of the Year.
Yep, get those brackets filled. Have a good one.